Buongiorno. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Per favore, parlo inglese. Grazie.
Slowly.
I'm honored, truly honored to speak to you today about the date of the Vesuvian eruption in the manuscript tradition. Grazie mille to the organizers and attendees of this conference, especially to Helga and Mario for your wonderful organization. This is a welcome gathering of scholars on a topic. It's been too long to make this happen, so thank you for making it happen. I should also recognize three of my colleagues who contributed to my work. Brian Hansen at DePauw, who helped with statistics, Roy Gibson at Durham, and especially Michael Reeve at Cambridge, who is key to solving the manuscript problem. Reeve will soon publish his own detailed study of Pliny's manuscript tradition. Gratias illis ago. Today, I'm going to share some details that I could not include in my 2022 book. And while I have thoughts and opinions about other kinds of evidence and arguments for the eruption date, I'm going to focus here today only on what we can learn about and from the manuscript tradition. Opinion, of course, generally divides into two camps: those supporting a late August eruption and those favoring a later autumn eruption, variously dated. The traditional August date relies principally on the readings of two manuscripts: the late 5th, early 6th century Paracelsus, known as Pi, and the 9th century Codex Medicaeus Laurentinus 47.36, called M, which of course has the readings on the lovely bags that you handed out today, Helga. So let's begin simply. Pi and M both give the 9th day before the calends of September, or August 24th, but articulated in different ways, using the ablative, no, and the accusative, nonum, constructions. Attesting the Pi reading are two early printed editions, Beroaldus 1504 and Aldus 1508. I'll mention them a little bit later as well. Another early manuscript, Vaticanus Regidensis Latinus 251, also uses the ablative. Now, the syntax for the ablative construction is more strictly correct. The ordinal number of the day, no, expressed as an adjective modifying the gapped da as an ablative of time when, that is, on the 9th day. The preposition ante, usually gapped, takes the accusative of the noun for the time of month marker, here the calends, itself modified by the adjectival month name, also accusative plural. When the accusative construction nonum appears, it's because ante was preferred stylistically to come first, and da became dm by attraction to the accusative case that ante governs, forcing the modifier nonum also to become accusative. That was fun, wasn't it? So Pliny the Younger, he expresses comparable dates in all the rest of his letters 4 other times. I think this is an important point. Pliny doesn't often give precise dates. It's fairly infrequent in his letters, and he chooses to do so in this letter. So that's an interesting thing to consider. Now, 3 times, Pliny just uses a Roman numeral. And I think probably that's what we would have had when Pliny wrote it originally. In one other case, we think he used an ablative. This convention and word order for expressing dates is true 97% of the time in all Latin literature from the start down through Tacitus. I counted them. When they don't appear in that order, it's usually because it's in poetry and they have to change the order of the words to fit the meter. These small details matter for deciphering the manuscript problem. If we see a date for the Vesuvian eruption expressed differently from this convention, we should be suspicious. And speaking of counting, we have to also remember that Roman counting was inclusive of both the first and last days in any number. Not all who have worked on the question have understood that. Now, neither the Pi nor the M manuscripts were in Italy during any part of the 15th century. The late 5th, early 6th century Pi was noticed in the Abbey of St. Victor in Paris near the end of 1500 by Giovanni Giocondo da Verona. He transcribed some of the letters, sent them to Aldus in Venice. Word spread, copies soon made their way into the print editions of Barrow Aldus of 1504 and Aldus in 1508, as we have seen. Only a few pages of Pi survive today. They're in the Morgan Library in New York, and they don't include the Vesuvian letters, so they don't help us there. M, originally copied at Fulda in the 9th century, soon moved north to the monastery at Corvi until it was stolen, and eventually reached Giovanni di Lorenzo de' Medici, the future Pope Leo X, in Florence by 1508. M was not stolen because it had Pliny's letters, but because Pliny's letters at that time were bound together with the sole surviving manuscript of Tacitus's Annales, books 1 through 6. Now, the Pi and M manuscripts were so superior to the previously available texts of letter 6.16, the one describing the eruption and its date, that the last time a philologist published a scholarly edition of Pliny's letters that did not use August 24th was in October 1515, when Giovanni Francesco Zeppi printed the Calends of November in his edition at Florence. Notice the word order for the date is unconventional. Unconventional because it has the month name first. So we should be suspicious. So, according to scholars of Pliny the Younger and experts in textual transmission, there has been no controversy about the date of the eruption for 510 years. But, clearly, there is still doubt, or we all wouldn't be here today, right? So, how, when, by whom, and why did uncertainty about Pliny's eruption date in the manuscript tradition arise? That's the story we're going to describe next. To do so, I have to discuss in detail the history of Pliny's text. The letters about the Vesuvian eruption are only 2 of 368, and we have to understand the journey of the whole collection of letters. As I was writing my book, I realized that it was going to be necessary to carry out the first comprehensive collation of the Vesuvian letters, construct a new stemma, or family tree, for the source tradition, decipher a mysterious branch of that tradition called theta, and only then could I figure out the problems with the eruption date in the written sources. I did not want to build a new stemma because it took an extra 3 years to do it, but I had to. Of course, a stemma is just the array of written sources of a particular ancient text arranged through time. From Pliny's original archetype, copies were variously made and distributed, and every time a new copy was made, changes crept into the text. Mostly we can trace those changes. They help us to reconstruct which manuscripts descended from which, and so determine, as best we can, the original text. Now, the traditional stemma, which you see here for Pliny's letters, developed between 1853 and 1963, divided into 8, 9, and 10 book families, denoting how many books of Pliny's letters survived in each of those families. They are otherwise known as Gamma, Alpha Theta, and Pi Theta. Of these, we have, or we know of, specific texts that represent all of those families except one, the mysterious Theta family. Now, to build a new stemma for Pliny's Vesuvian letters, I collected scans of 79 of the 80 known extant manuscripts and read many of them in person. The location of the 80th manuscript, Marston 54, has been unknown since 1962. But I'm happy to say that I have tracked it down. It is now in the private ownership of Henri Schiller in Paris. I have not seen it yet. Mr. Schiller is quite elderly. I do know from other studies of that manuscript that it belongs to the late 1460s and would not impact the results of this study. I also collected all printed editions and also sets of annotations of printed editions or manuscripts. I then collated the 426 differences across all of the copies of both letters. This adds up to nearly a third of all words in both letters. So the database that results from that has almost 80,000 literal readings. And by literal, I mean exactly what it says in the source, with abbreviations and spelling variations. This was all done by hand and checked, and we have to double this number when we include the normalized readings. Normalized readings are readings expanded into full standard proper Latin from their abbreviations or spelling variations. And we need normalized readings in order to do statistical comparison. So the massive size of this data set made empirical stemmatology possible. That is, I used statistical analysis with the R software on the normalized readings. I employed several techniques, and 2 of them were most effective in grouping texts according to shared readings or shared mistakes. Markers in common, the total number of identical readings between any 2 texts, and principal component analysis, something archaeologists are very familiar with, which group texts according to clusters based on their Levenstein edit distance, which measured the minimum number of steps it took to convert one word into another word. These techniques help to sort out into workable groupings the texts on which I could then employ traditional collation to draft a new and comprehensive family tree for Pliny's letters about Vesuvius. My new stemma includes all of the texts down to the present day. The family tree is provisional in the sense that probably only about 10% of manuscripts have survived, that it still exists. But you can see from this just how complicated and convoluted the story of the text is. Yes, it's still going. I'm only going to focus on a few points, right? I'm sure you're glad for that. So, here we go. In Italy, in the early 15th century, only one manuscript that was known contained the Vesuvian letters, and that is called Gamma. Gamma was rediscovered in Verona in 1419 and then furiously copied. The descendants of Gamma comprise 95% of all surviving manuscripts that contain the Vesuvian letters. Two of the branches of Gamma are key. Gamma 3b1, which emerged in the late 1420s, and we're going to talk about this one a lot, and a revision made by Lorenzo Valla in Naples in 1438. So we'll look at both of those more closely. But first, I have to talk about the mysterious Theta branch of the manuscript tradition. Professor Stout of Indiana University first argued that a cluster of strange readings comprised a new family branch, which he called Theta. His theory has generally been accepted, but nobody has figured out exactly what Theta was or where it came from. So, the solution involves using annotations, or what a scholar did with different versions of the same text side by side. They often marked up one version with alternate readings that they found in the other, or with highly educated guesses that we call conjectures. Now, sometimes these annotations were done right over the original lines, and those are superlinear annotations, and sometimes they were done on the side, marginal annotations. You often find multiple sets of annotations on the same manuscript, which require distinguishing scribal handwriting. And we're going to distinguish some scribal handwriting later. Okay, let's go into the weeds. Ci cacciamo in un ginfraio. We start with the manuscript written at Rome in October 1453. Vaticanus Reginensis Latinos 1472, or R 1472. I'm going to talk about this one a lot. Remember that manuscript. It is the most important one in the entire story. It belongs to the Gamma 3b1 family that we noted earlier. It had a hypothetical descendant, which we call C0. And note, it is very common in manuscript studies to posit hypothetical sources from clues preserved in their descendants. Then we detour to Naples in 1438, where Lorenzo Valla made numerous conjectures to correct his own personal copy of Pliny's letters. Valla's conjectures were impressive. In my sample, he was correct 54% of the time. Then Valla brought his personal copy with him when he moved to Rome in 1448. There, Valla readings were annotated into C0 and integrated into its descendant C. Now, before C was bound, because copying was done on loose-leaf pages, missing Book 8 letters preserved in a Theta source at Rome were appended at the end of the manuscript and called Book 9 by the very same scribe. Otherwise, C has no Theta readings. C was a presentation copy to young Francesco Piccolomini, the future Pope Pius III. Now, C naught had another descendant, F naught. It received annotations from Theta, but it did not get Book 8 because it had already been bound. A descendant of F naught, see, I'm confusing myself.